The next point would be remember to be considerate, or remember to be gentle. Because we ultimately don't need to be the ones to get even. God takes care of it. Then the next verse, Paul says, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. Now, it says don't be anxious, or don't worry, which is what we're ultimately talking about. He's telling us not to do it. Now, at times, that seems crazy, right? But he's not telling us not to be concerned about things. He's telling us not to worry about them. We can be concerned about things. We can have things that are on our mind, but we're not to worry about them. Like, you can be concerned about your 401k, but you're not supposed to worry about it. You can be concerned about your paycheck and paying your bill, but you don't need to worry about it. What he's ultimately telling us is, when you feel like worrying, use this as an opportunity to pray. When you feel on the verge of worry, turn that to prayer. And he actually gives us some clear instruction on prayer. And he says, by prayer. And the word for prayer there is more of the idea of worship. So when we come to God, we start off, we worship God for who he is first. Knowing that he is sovereign, he is in control of everything. If he's in control of everything, we don't need to be anxious. We don't need to worry, because he's got it handled. And the next thing he says is by and petition. And petition is a fancy word to tell someone what you need. Something super simple. God, I need this. And he tells us this because we can bring our petitions, we can bring our concerns to God. We say, God, I am concerned about this. This is bothering me right now. And in Luke 12, verse 30, you guys don't need to turn there. He said, Jesus, talking about our most basic needs, food, shelter, clothing, he says this about the Father. Your Father knows that you need them. God knows everything we need. Not anything. There's nothing that God doesn't know we need. Now, God wants us to share them with him. He wants us to say, I have this concern. This is bothering me. Not because he doesn't know. He's God. He knows everything. He knows exactly what we need. But it's to build the relationship. Because if we don't tell God what we need, we're going to have things work out, and then we're going to be like, oh, I'm glad that worked out. But if we tell God what we need, and then it happens, who's then responsible in our minds, in our hearts? Jesus is then responsible because we shared it with him. The point is to build the relationship with God. Because he cares. He knows what we need and he cares about us. He sent Jesus to die for us. For us. While we didn't deserve it. And then he says, with thanksgiving. Thanksgiving. We're to thank God for what he gives us. But we're also supposed to thank God for what he doesn't give us. There are times where we ask God for something. God, will you heal this person? And you want to what? For some reason, God chooses not to. But we're thankful. Or we say, God, heal this person. And he does, and then we're thankful for it. Currently, while I'm looking for work, I went to a temp agency and I said, can I have some work? And they said, oh yeah, we'll get you work. And they got me 5 days worth of work in March. And that's it. They haven't gotten me any more work. But there's been times where I wouldn't have been able to do things if I had work. There were things where I had to go pick up my brother from school. I wouldn't have been able to go pick him up because I had work. There are moments where the things that I don't have, I need to be just as thankful to God for. I can't just be thankful for what he gives me. Because God is not Barbara Eden from I Dream a Genie. He's not the genie from Aladdin. He doesn't just give us what we want. He gives us exactly what we want. Amen. In the Bible, God is referred to as Father, right? And so that means at times we can learn things about God from our earthly parents. Now, some of you probably don't want to learn anything about God from your parents because your parents will this situation, they're horrible. Like if I tried to learn things about God, about God from my father, I would assume God is distant, that he left when I was 6, and he doesn't care. That he might not show up for my important events. So, some of you, God being a father can be hard to recognize, but he is a far better father than your earthly. And some of you, you have great examples from parents. And guess what? God is still a far better father than your earthly parents. But that doesn't mean your earthly parents aren't good. Now, when you have a child, the child may come to a parent and say, I need something. But if that's all they ever did, the parent, that's not a relationship. That's not interaction. That's an ATM machine. That's, I need money. Okay, here you go. Here's money. Like, yeah. I did not say that. No. I just wanted that to be duly noted. But if you spend time with your parent and you ask them about their day and you interact with them and you care for them and you do things for them, then one of the privileges of the relationship is being able to ask for things. That's the way it is with God. God doesn't just want us to ask all the time. God wants a relationship with us. He wants, what are you going through? Not just, I need money for this now. He wants that intimate relationship. Now, sometimes parents won't give their child everything they ask, right? How many of you asked your parents for something and they said no? At least once in your life. Right? Sometimes, as we look back, we realize that that's a good thing. Like, oh, I want to go do this. No, that's not good. You should not go do this. And then later, I'm like, I also continue, I didn't go do that. Or like, when you're like 3 years old and you ask your parents to play with scissors or a knife or fire, like, your parents say no. And that's a good thing, right? Because that could have hurt. Or you're 6 and you're like, Dad, can I shoot the gun? No, you can't shoot the gun. You know? Like all these, or you're like 10, can I drive the car? No. Like when our parents tell us no on certain things, that's a good decision. We need to be thankful for that. Because they ultimately know what's best in that situation. I mean, sometimes they might get it wrong, but generally when it's things they're saying no about, it's pretty good. And that's the way God is. God does not just arbitrarily tell us no. He knows exactly what we need. He is that loving Father. And that's what we're doing here. We're building this relationship. That's why he says it. Present your request to God. You're coming and telling God. And now, if you decide to take notes, the one here is remember to pray. Because when you begin to worry, you can turn it into prayer and you can build your relationship. If you're going through worry, you can say, oh, I'm going to pray to God. And then instantly you build this habit of praying. And you continue. And it builds a long life of prayer. And then in verse 7, he says, and the peace of God will transcend all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. He says, and. He's connecting it all. It's not just the peace of God will transcend all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. It says, and the peace of God. It's connected to what came before. It's connected to those things he just told us to do. And he doesn't say it might happen. He says it will happen. Is that a good promise? Amen. That it will happen? That you will have the peace of God? It will happen. And he says, which transcends all understanding. You're not going to understand it. It is beyond comprehension at times. This peace that God gives to us, that's a gift. This is what enabled Paul to say, for me to live is Christ, to die is gain. God had granted him peace in the midst of his worst situation. He then had the peace to carry on because God granted it to him. Because Paul was always joyful. Paul was gentle. Paul It will happen. We need to remember that. Now, the word for guard here gives the idea of a military garrison or some troops standing and protecting something. And what is it protecting? Your hearts and your minds. The two places where you can worry. Because you can either worry because of your feelings, what you're feeling at a moment in time, or you can worry because of the thoughts in your head. It's not disconnected from the anxious thoughts and the worry. It is directly connected to it. He will provide that for you, and it will guard you. Now, I understand it can be difficult to understand things when it says beyond comprehension or beyond understanding. That can be difficult. I'm logical, analytical, and when it's like, you can't understand it. What do you mean I can't understand it? Then it's not real if I can't understand it. Well, let me give you a silly example, okay? I have hair on my head, I have hair on my arms. The hair on my head will grow to the ground if I let it. But the hair on my arms won't, right? Like, I don't need to go get a haircut on my arms. I do not need to wrap hair around my arm. It won't grow to the floor if I let it. It just stops growing. Just somewhere along the way, just says, oh, that's as long as we're going to grow. But if I let the hair on my head grow, it'll grow all the way to the ground. It'll take a really long time, but it would get there. Now, that's a silly example, right? That's not what are you talking about? But just because I don't understand why this grows a certain length and this won't grow a certain length, doesn't mean I don't believe in it. I believe I have hair on my arm and I have hair on my head. Right? No, hopefully I'll keep it all. And that's a silly example, but sometimes we need to trust God. It's not about the understanding it completely, because we won't understand everything completely. If we did, then God wouldn't be God. He would be a finite being if we understood everything about God. And that's what he's giving us peace that, you want to know, it doesn't make sense. So if you're writing things down, if you want to take another note, it's remember to trust in God's peace. God will grant us peace if we do these things. If this might happen, or this could happen, this will happen. And we just need to do it. We need to trust. We need to trust in the peace that he offers. Now, let's recap the three things we need to do, and then the last thing that will happen. It's remember to rejoice when we rejoice, and then remember to be considerate or to be gentle, and then remember to pray, and then remember to trust in God's peace. If we do the first three, Paul says it will happen. We will have peace that transcends understanding. I don't know how it happens, but he says it will. There are lots of things God says will happen, and I have no clue how they're going to happen, or the way they happen. How does he work all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose? I don't know, but as Ron said, you can look back and you can see. You can see what he does. You can see the change that he's caused to occur. The things that he's made happen. Wow. There are things we ask for and we don't get them, and then 5 years down the road we look back and we say, wow, I'm really glad I didn't get that. I've asked God to give me relationships before that pale in comparison to that relationship, my relationship with him. I would be miserable with some of the women I asked God to let me marry. It would be horrible. So, I don't understand how he does it, but he does it. And that's what he promises to do here. Now, if you're a strong, committed Christian, here's what you can do with this. You can use it as a gentle reminder. You don't deal with worry. You're good. Worry is not something that consumes you. You can just use this as a reminder that God has granted you that. If you're not a strong Christian and you do